A very good morning to you. Welcome along to Thursday morning's OTB AM. We're here with you all the way until 9:30 this morning. As ever, you can get involved by leaving your comments on whatever stream you're watching this, or you can tweet us directly at @OffTheBallAM is the Twitter handle for the show. We also obviously pick up the @OffTheBall tweets as well. Dan McDonald, the Irish Independent, here with us this morning. Dan, how are you?
Hey, Jared, good morning.
An interesting night of football, overshadowed somewhat by the 5-5 draw. I mean, you know, we've got to go to the big story of the night. Aston Villa drew 5-5.
I was going to say, when you say the 5-5 draw, does every listener or every sort of, you know, everyone watching on streaming go, oh yeah, the Villa game, or did it just is it just sort of now the magic of that match is creeping out? But it was a striking feature last night that you're looking through the updates, or I was watching the Liverpool match. I know there was sort of a good choice of games for people, but yeah, that Villa stream, because Sky Sports News, you see, they do the goals as they come in now.
Yeah, it's great
on those championship nights. So I did actually sort of spend 20 minutes of the night over there, and it was pretty good. Yeah,
I was. I actually watched a good 15 minutes of Spain versus New Zealand in the Under-17 Girls World Cup.
Right.
Because my 4-year-old walked down and she was like, I don't want to watch this. Can I watch the girls? I was like, okay. So we had to watch 15 minutes of that. It was pretty good football, actually.
Really? Yeah.
Spain were 2-0 up when we
Football
stopped watching.
World Cup, under 17.
Yeah, no, not rugby.
I was thinking, the New Zealand, well, you know, they're just good at sports generally.
So I was like, this is the glamour of your life as a parent now. Liverpool and PSG are playing what, by all accounts, is not a bad game.
That was good too.
The Villa game is going completely crazy, and we're like, yes, we can watch this.
Well, at least it is sport, Jerry.
It is sport. But yeah, it led to a lot of questions like, why are there no people watching this? And why do the boys play with the boys and the girls play with the girls? I'm like, I don't know. I have no answers for this.
Sure, that's a big deal. There are big questions to be dealing with on a
when you're like on the couch,
evening,
kind of trying to veg here. You should be in bed. Anyway, so that was my evening. I didn't quite get to fully appreciate the majesty of the Liverpool game. Was it as good as was the performance? Or
well, I don't know. Like it was decent. I mean, I think the dynamic of the game was shifted by the fact that sort of Liverpool were playing catch up. So, I mean, PSG got ahead, and then there was spells in the match where PSG were almost saying to Liverpool, come and break us down. And Liverpool struggled with that. And then there was these sort of counter-attack movements from PSG, with particularly the second goal. But really, I mean, the game was given a bit of spark by a sort of a crazy angle, Di Maria tackle just before half-time, a sort of a crazy lunge. And I don't know, it was heading towards a pretty grim night for Liverpool, and then the 2-1 gave the illusion it was close and it was tight, but actually really they weren't banging the door down at all. So I wouldn't sort of put it down as a classic game or anything like that. I think PSG, if they'd had to come out to chase the game, if Liverpool had got ahead, it would have set up a real sort of thrilling affair. But they're in a bit of bother now. Liverpool, I mean, it's the obvious really that they're in a bit of bother, and the group stages of the Champions League, they don't always ignite, but actually there's a number of groups here that are going to the wire, and there's going to be something really to play for in the last day.
They're going out if they don't.
They need to beat Napoli basically in the last game. It's pretty straightforward for them, and the Spurs situation is tied up with the Spurs go to Barcelona, and I think they have to match. Their result against Barcelona needs to be the same as Inter's result against PSV. You'd assume Inter would beat PSV, which means Spurs have to go and win in the Camp Nou. So that's going to be a good night of football, And
Barcelona are already through though, and
they're through, but
sometimes they kind of throw those games.
Take the foot off. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any the games to hand in mind, but they've been a mixed bag in recent years. I recall a couple of times that was expected, and then they just turned it on.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Yeah. It's like you're going to work, and the work is like a nice environment. You're like, oh, it's messy on my team. We're probably going to be okay.
The pressure's
tonight.
off. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so let's tell you what's coming up on the show today. Andy Dunne's going to join us to talk about rugby ahead of the weekend. But really, what we're going to do is try and pick a squad for the Six Nations and see who will be left out and sitting on the bench for that one. Chess and boxing. Brin-Jonathan Butler has written a book about the World Championships of Chess. Pretty good timing for this because I don't know. Was there a result? There was a result. Did Magnus Carlsen win? Oh, Magnus Carlsen won. Okay, so Armageddon in the chess world was imminent. Do you know anything about this?
I've been dealing with Armageddon in the Irish football world of some kind, so this whole chess thing has passed me by. I've seen references to it.
Yeah, so they avoided Armageddon, I'm just being told here. So we recorded this piece yesterday afternoon when Armageddon was still a potential. I mean, who knew that the chess world could lead to
Armageddon?
So
what is Armageddon? What could have happened?
So they drew 12 consecutive games in the final of the World Championships, and this is Magnus Carlsen is like he's saved chess. He's brought it back to obviously not quite the mainstream.
Close enough to the mainstream.
Yeah. And he was involved in a series of draws, and they go from normal games, like full-length games, and then they go, okay, well, let's have like a speed round, and then it's like
a five-a-side.
Pretty much, it's like 40 minutes. I think it's 40 minutes games, and then it's down to 5 minutes games, and then it's Armageddon.
Right.
Now, we didn't get to the point where we went, what would that actually mean? It sounds great. What does it mean? So I presume, I don't know, is it like a minute of chess, and they decide like who's winning after a minute?
Penalties or something.
It's like, yeah,
the chess equivalent of penalties.
Who can flick the horse the furthest? I know it's called a night before everybody.
Yeah. Dignified end.
So anyway, he's a brilliant boxing writer, and that's kind of how we would have known him on the show over the last couple of years. He's been up to Alabama, down to Alabama, to hang out with Deontay Wilder. So we'll talk to him about Wilder and Fury as well. And we're going to bring you through the newspapers and then do our breakfast menu. Papers now.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
So Jurgen Klopp says they made us look like butchers on the back page of the Irish Independent. Story there about Ronan O'Gara. I'm ready for Ireland's call. That is for Ireland call rather. That is an interview he did with Sinead Kassan yesterday, where he said, look, one phone call can change things, and if that phone call comes, then he'd have to think about it. Obviously, he's in Crusaders, contracted up until at least the end of the Rugby World Cup, and then obviously Andy Farrell will be looking for his team. Maybe Andy Farrell has his team already in mind. Maybe O'Gara is part of that. It'll be interesting to see what happens. The other one there is Leinster defend early start to pre-season competition. So GAA politics is about to explode in the next couple of weeks, and we'll keep an eye on that one. Vincent Hogan's piece inside is asking, can Robbie teach anybody to play? Which is a good question, right? This is kind of the nub of the whole, what is Robbie doing?
Yeah.
Robbie wants to be a manager and has managed to convince the FAI / Mick McCarthy that he should be part of this. I mean, he's not going to have a central role, so it's not that important a job. It's not like he's the second in command. TC is the coach on the pitch, doing all that stuff. Robbie's just an extra body.
Yeah, I mean, he's there to learn, essentially. That seems to be part of it. But also, there's mixed, not mixed messages, but I mean, Rude Doctor's in some of the papers today speaking about, how Robbie is passionate about underage levels as well and might be going to matches at under 13, under 15 level. John Delaney the other day and Mick McCarthy alluded to the not quite fact, but possibility where Robbie will be part of the succession plan too, so that post-2020 he may still be involved in Stephen Kenny's team or in some shape or form. So it's clear that Robbie's been earmarked for review in the future, but there's a debate over, well, how good a coach will Robbie actually be? We just don't know. And Vincent Hogan's point, I think, the piece is a decent piece talking about, like, he has a sort of he always had an instinctive ability, a genius, and how do you translate that to coaching? And that's the eternal challenge for the great players, when can they actually explain what it was that made them great?
Yeah. I'd say Robbie had no intention of helping anybody when he was a player to learn what it was that he was doing. Now that he's like officially formally retired, and we'll talk about his career in a couple of minutes' time, that maybe he'll actually be willing to explain where the feints were coming from, where the movement was, why the not moving was part of his game. Who knows? Yeah,
well, he has been training with Shamrock Rovers on and off for the last sort of 18 months or so, in or around his stay in India. And I know going to sort of Shamrock Rovers gigs, and Stephen Bradley, the manager, would speak about how Robbie would occasionally give the strikers a bit of a drill. And I spoke to one or two of the Rovers players who said, Robbie was very helpful to them, just trying to explain movements and stuff. But it's still, that's grand when it's a favour almost, it's a bonus. Whereas now there'll be stuff coming out about how good or not he is. Yeah. So we'll find out.
Yeah. Part of me wonders if, somebody was making the point, it's not work experience, it's the senior international team. But the senior international team always put players in for friendlies who weren't getting, Mick McCarthy famously would have given Alan Kelly matches when he wasn't getting games at club level to try and get him a loan move. And I don't think anybody has any problems with that per se. I mean, Dean Kiley might have had some problems with that.
Yeah.
But ordinarily it's we're trying to improve the opportunity for everybody involved in Irish football. And I'm not saying it is work experience, but is it the worst thing for us to have players like this in the system? If the Kenny and Keith Andrews experiment had actually worked and they'd been more embedded, then this would have been a continuation of that. The plan isn't quite working, but the plan's not necessarily a bad one.
Yeah, I think one of the problems we have in football here is just because we don't have a full-time industry here, that there's just not enough jobs, to keep people in the game. And I think the argument is that Mick McCarthy's gone for 2 coaches. Now, under the previous regime, there was Guppy, Walford, there was a lot of coaches.
Yeah.
But you might have envisaged maybe one more coach being involved in this setup. Say the names that have been mentioned, like Lee Carsley or Stephen Reid, who, as far as I know, weren't approached in any way. And the argument would be, well, should one of them not be sort of part of this setup, and then Robbie too, in some degree, learning.
Yeah.
He hasn't done his pro license yet, which is in theory the fully qualified elite level coaching thing, and doctors defending the argument that it's sending out the wrong message by getting Robbie in such a plum role without having even gone through that process.
Yeah, okay, so, fair enough. It's definitely swings and roundabouts when it comes to that. So the Sports Thursday in the Irish Times, Liverpool and Last Chance Saloon as away woes go on. That's the picture of Neymar that we've all come to know and love. And then Doctor says FAI's new succession plan is a logical step. High performance director confident new plan can lead to a bright future. That's Emmett Malone's piece with Rude Doctor. And then obviously Christian Eriksen scored late for Spurs at Wembley against Inter to keep alive their chances of qualifying. Will be interesting. That'll be a decent game anyway at Camp Nou as opposed to a dead rubber. And then the Irish Times have their version of the story about the dead Ballybrack player, Lazarus-like, risen from the dead. Back of the Times Ireland edition, down to the wire. That's Virgil van Dijk and Harry Kane. Van Dijk not happy, Harry Kane hard to tell, but I presume pretty happy. And then Keane hailed by McCarthy. Mick McCarthy has lauded the career of Robbie Keane. We'll do the same in a couple of minutes' time. And then players in the dark over rule changes. This is the inter-county football teams will be in the dark about the exact playing rules for the National League until a week before the competition begins. This is an interesting take from Paul Keane in the Times. The GPA issued a strongly worded statement saying that they wanted proper consultation with the GAA. They had a meeting with the GAA yesterday, and the GAA said, don't worry about these new rules. They're only going to be in for the league if we ratify them after we go through the pre-season tournaments. So we'll say yeah now, and then we'll have another chance to say no before the league starts.
So there's a last minute, there's a get out clause.
Yeah. Now I wonder if that's like don't worry lads, we can always, if it's rubbish we'll change them, but we're not changing them.
But that's just giving people time to familiarise themselves a bit more without believing it's imminent, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think I would say an Irish solution to an Irish problem.
I had that phrase around the world in the last week or so, I think.
So pantomime villain, Neymar stars as PSG off Liverpool, Spurs win takes fight to the last day. And then Pádraig Fanning fumes at Daisha training camp punishment. This is the various counties who have all been punished, and the other counties who did the exact same thing but haven't been punished. It would lead to a sense of unfairness, generally. And then N'Golo Kante got absolutely hammered by Mauricio Sarri.
Yeah, that's in a few other places. Yeah. About trying to solve the match in the first 15 minutes against Spurs, sort of suggesting he lacked discipline or positional discipline in the game, which is not usually a criticism you hear sort of levelled in his direction.
Or in public.
Yeah, I don't know.
The manager of their best player who's just signed a new £75 million pounds contract.
You see, you always try and believe that this is part of some kind of psychology or mind games, or did he just catch him at the wrong moment and just say that he's actually really been annoying me all week. But I don't know, Sarri's actually, he's sort of not been involved in anything like this that much since he's got in, unless I've missed it. He hasn't necessarily been sort of a magnet for any kind of controversy, but I guess there comes a time where his every comment now will be scrutinised.
Completely under the radar, really.
Yeah, he's actually managed it pretty impressively.
I guess after you get beaten in a big game like that, it's a London derby, you want to come out and say something. But is he not responsible for Kante playing in the wrong position?
Yeah, I would have thought so. I mean, I know he's an experienced player. I don't know.
It's essentially a slightly forward midfield, but still midfield. Do just be more involved.
I suppose though it is it's a tactical analysis rather than a sort of a slight on his personality. You want managers to come out and talk about the game and what happened and who could have done what without it becoming a massive deal. But I guess. So, what type of sort of comment do we want from managers then? If they shy away from that, then you're not getting anything of any real insight at all.
Yeah, it's true. And so this is the last time, basically, we're ever going to hear him say
now in future, everyone did well. Everyone did well.
Yeah. Oh, they were all excellent. They all have lovely bottoms. Okay, so the back page of the front page of the Telegraph sports section is obviously the picture of Neymar and Mbappe, but also they've got a story about Tyson Fury. Tyson's victory. Fury takes to the streets to win over the hearts of LA. There is a sense that that fight hasn't really gripped America just yet. We'll get to that a little bit later with Brin-Jonathan Butler.
Yeah, so we have the tabloids today now beat Barca on the back page of the Mail. It's pretty straightforward, laying out the challenge that Spurs, they need to go there and win, basically. And also there's a GPA line, GPA victory in GAA's U-turn on rules review. As you mentioned, seems like you can spin that story or present it in several different ways.
Yeah, and look, maybe it's just good politics from the GAA president to go, yeah, come on in, here's the story, we'll issue a statement afterwards, fair enough, we'll talk to you more in advance next time. Maybe it's just a growing maturity.
Maturity, yeah.
Maybe.
We'll see. The Sun then, we have Chris of Life. You can see what they did, of course, with Christian Eriksen again on the back page, and then a bit of Neymar to the side as well. That N'Golo Kante story, and Robbie Keane at the top. It's interesting, like a few papers have gone for Spurs on the back, whereas I would have thought, in some ways, like the Irish market, Liverpool is the massive deal.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's just the way it goes sometimes when you're, I don't know, late at night and late calls to be made.
I'd say the 7:45 and the 8 o'clock kickoff is a big difference for papers going to print, right?
Yeah, it would be. 8 o'clock would make it pretty tight, yeah. And obviously in the end there was a Klopp quote. That would be a slightly later edition, when you actually get the actual Klopp reaction to it.
Was there what time was the first paper going to print?
Oh, generally our first edition, and every paper is different, but we would have one that would go around that sort of 9:30, 10:15 territory,
no.
which would be the one that would go to.
You think Liverpool might be about to go out
Yeah,
here?
well, generally when there's a big match night, you wait for the games, but that might be the first edition that goes to England and stuff like that, and some of the promotional copies and stuff that people might see in coffee shops and that type of thing. But yeah, so it is a tight one. But I mean, to me, Liverpool is the bigger Irish market, and the Mirror, against all odds, is actually a good back page because it manages to incorporate both of them with Salah on one side and Eriksen on the other, and both of them, I suppose, have to win on the last day. And also, I'm a calamity, get me out of here at the top, which is John Cross there, with Alexis Sanchez topically wanting to get out of Manchester United. I don't think he wants to actually go and join Harry Redknapp in the jungle or somewhere.
Have you watched any of Harry in the Jungle?
I haven't, no.
This
is the problem with the Irish football's crisis, that I've missed the chess and Harry Redknapp in the jungle and the Spain-New Zealand under-17s.
There you go, yeah.
So there's been a lot going on in the world that I've missed out on. And then the Star, you have Tough at the Cop as well, with Virgil van Dijk there looking pretty downbeat after and Christian Saviour for Spurs at the bottom. And yeah, it's GAA and Robbie Keane. I mean, Robbie Keane is sort of everywhere. And then the Herald, finally, it's Napoli or bust for Reds after the Paris nightmare. And a few Anthony Martial comments as well. So there we go.
Finished 2-0, I just checked there. So the Spain beat New Zealand 2-0 in Montevideo last night.
Oh, Montevideo, okay, yeah.
Yeah, pretty
venue.
No, pretty glamorous, right? Like having it in Uruguay. A bit random.
Yeah, it's been such great football history there. Because I went to Uruguay like 6 or 7 years ago. Of course, the first World Cup final was there.
Yeah.
And there's still like at the
same stadium.
Yeah, there's a museum at the stadium. It's a Stadio Centenario, I think, or something. And they still have, because obviously 1950 World Cup was there. No, 1950 was in Brazil, sorry, but Uruguay won the World Cup in 50. So the museum is part relics from 1930, and then also some stuff from the 1950 Uruguay team, like the match ball, and there's pictures of all the first all the teams arriving in Uruguay and stuff, the first teams that actually competed, because it was almost invitational, that first World Cup. But that's why, in the context of this 2030 World Cup bid, that Ireland are sort of part of this feasibility, and it does seem like they're probably going to crack ahead. Now, I know the crowd trouble in Argentina, there's an argument that it might trouble their bid, but this Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay bid is probably the main rival, is probably the favourite, because of the symbolism of 100 years on, going back to the region where it all began. Yeah. So that could well be the story over the next couple of years. We're going to have to find a negative and bringing it back to where it all began, which is actually probably a great idea.
Yeah. but we've just come up with, we need to go to Argentina, we need to go to Paraguay, and we need to go to Montevideo. We're here in the ruins of Montevideo. Look at this place. There's no way they could possibly host a World Cup.
Yeah, exactly. Which is actually, well, it probably is the perfect place to go. But still, we'll all get on board, get our green hats on. Yeah.
The green jersey never got us in trouble before. Right, let's move on. Speaking on Virgin Media Sport last night, Graeme Souness had this to say about Liverpool's performance.
Games at this level, if you're not making a goalkeeper work. I think there's a couple of things going on at Liverpool. If you go back to the start of the season, the managers tried to sign 3 midfield players. You got 2, Keita, Fabinho. Have they improved it? No. Tried to get Fekir from Lyon. That tells you the manager wasn't happy with his midfield. He wanted more creativity. Last year, the midfield of Liverpool steamrolled teams. They were high energy, in their face, got people, they roughed them up physically. Too much energy for teams when they're playing against them, and then they were getting balls into the front three, and they were on fire last year. I don't think the midfield are doing that this time round. We've seen it against Napoli in the first game. We've seen it against Red Star away. They got steamrolled themselves. They were being out-muscled in midfield. Tonight it wasn't so much of that, but I think that was because the way the game panned out, with Paris Saint-Germain scoring an early goal, sitting back, getting a second goal, and then Liverpool scoring right on half-time. In the second half in that game, they made no attempt to come out and take Liverpool on. They sat in there, defended their 18-yard box with ease. Liverpool was up.
That's the worrying thing for Liverpool fans really tonight, Graeme, isn't it? Isn't that there was no other shot on target? Shaqiri came on, Keita came on. It
is a worry. You play 90 minutes with all that firepower they've got on the pitch, Liverpool, and they manage one shot on target in 90 minutes. You'd think that would be nigh on impossible for the players Liverpool have got, but they've achieved it tonight. And you're saying 5 shots on target in 3 away games. You don't win the European Cup unless you're scoring goals. And if you make a mistake at all, you'll be punished at the highest level.
Yeah, so that's Graeme Souness, unimpressed by the midfield last night from Liverpool. A reminder, of course, Virgin Media Sport is the new home of European football in Ireland, with more than 400 UEFA Champions League, Europa League and Nations League games live this season. Virgin Media Sport is exclusive to all Virgin Media TV customers, who can also download the TV Anywhere app and stream all the action whenever and wherever they like. It's funny, following Liverpool fans on Twitter, they have been constantly impressed by the team's ability to win games where they're not playing well, but very concerned about the fact that they're not playing well. So they pointed out more points than they've ever had in the Premier League season, and yet, are we really actually that good? It doesn't feel like they've clicked into a gear where there's a confidence about what the team might achieve, and yet, why the hell not? What are they missing?
Yeah, I mean, it is strange that they are sort of grinding in the league a small bit. It's not necessarily what we associate with that Liverpool team. Now, I know that there have been a couple of games where they've steamrolled teams this year, but actually, yeah, in recent weeks, they even had games at Huddersfield and stuff where they've toiled a small bit.
Yeah.
And Souness touched on it, and just watching some of the debate last night, that I remember before the first game, or around the first game of the season, where they beat West Ham, and they'd brought in Keita, and he'd impressed, and then Fabinho had been brought in, and the whole argument was, well, they've now got variety in the midfield that they didn't have.
Yeah.
Probably since Coutinho left, they'd addressed that obviously they had this energetic midfield last year that was the perfect almost foil for the front three, but the feel was they needed to add a little bit more subtlety, a little bit more sort of intelligent movement, and Keita was meant to fill some of these gaps, but it just hasn't really worked. He doesn't seem to have hit on whatever the formula might be, and you saw when they played Manchester City, which is the sort of the test for them really, that they were pretty fortunate. Like, I mean, if it wasn't for Mahrez's crazy penalty, that's a defeat, and even the league table has a slightly different look to it now.
Yeah. So, is it fixable in the short term, and is it terminal if they don't get out? It might not be the worst thing of all time if they end up not qualifying for the Champions League, and then the Europa League, they put the B team out for the rest of the season. They go, we don't care about that. We reached our Champions League final last year. Fair enough, that was an amazing season, brilliant for us. This year, we're going to try and go toe-to-toe with Man City.
Yeah, I see the point, but I think if they ended up in the Europa League, I mean, I still think ultimately Klopp could do with a trophy. He could do with something to show for his efforts there, because so what happens, I think Man City are still a good bit better, and I find it very hard to see them not winning the Premier League. So, okay, last year they were fourth and got a Champions League final, so is second and sacking off the Europa League a better season? I mean, it's actually not, no. I think it's harder to sell that as a real. It depends on
how second are they? Do they run them really close? Like, if it's 10 points at the end of the season and they're just the best of the rest, no dice. But if it's a genuine title race with like Pep's Man City, who have invested 17 billion and they look pretty good, if you can run that team close in the league. Yeah,
no, it's true. You can't portray that in particular. I just don't agree. I just think they should. The Europa League is still something to, if they end up there. I know it's a consolation prize, but they should still have a go at it, because I just think you can't sort of disregard the boost from winning something.
Are they likely to end up there, or can?
I think they can still beat Napoli on the last day. I mean, if they don't, well, that just brings its own debate about where they are. I mean, they were a Champions League finalist last year who were unlucky, with how things panned out to a degree. So if they can't beat Napoli at home to go through, well, then that there is an element of sort of you have to sort of introspection and look at what actually has happened. I I mean, I think what was the stat last night in their 3 away games? Was it 5 shots? I think in their 3 away games in the Champions League. So, for a team that you were meant to be sort of swashbuckling and entertaining, those stats are slightly surprising.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it?
It doesn't really. No.
And I think maybe that's the bit. That's the conundrum that the Liverpool fans that you respect are saying. It's like it all seems a little bit anachronistic. Something isn't quite right.
It's not clicking. Yeah.
And so before the game, Klopp is talking about Salah about he's back to his best. He's absolutely back to his best. This is it now. He's back to his best. But you kind of feel like that's him trying to talk Salah into being back to his best. That he's not quite. Now maybe last season was the aberration, and he's never going to be as good as he was last year because it was stratospherically.
Yeah, and the fear is that he also tried to stretch himself to play in that World Cup.
He definitely did,
and that can catch up with you over a period of time. You know, you look at Alexis Sanchez there, who had sort of a brutal run of summers where he was playing a lot of football between his international commitments, and there comes a time where you just can't keep that up.
No, you hit a wall.
And it feels like, Salah at some point, he's so important to them, yet does he actually just need a 2-3 week down period just to take him out of the... But every game, I'm sure they would have loved to be through with one game to go, whereas now it's like everything is crisis. And with the Man City title situation, you have to be at it every week. There's no window for them to relax there.
And that's the counter-argument for actually saying, OK, we know that we've built a squad which is capable of competing, and we haven't got out of the group in the Champions League. I would definitely be of the view, give Salah a rest for the...
Yeah, you can rest 1 or 2 players. But I think there's a difference between that and just throwing the whole thing completely. They should have the strength of squad to be able to overcome one player. I mean, if not, then that raises another question about how they would cope if there's a natural injury anyway.
Yeah, or if he decides he wants to move on. I mean, you still look back at the 2-0 defeat that they suffered against Red Star, and you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, well, that is the result. I mean, the levels in Europe are such now, and the dominance of the bigger leagues, that, I mean, a team from the Serbian league really shouldn't be beating a Premier League side. Just, we see we see a lot of these leagues that are competing in summer against like Irish clubs and stuff. It's not long, since Shamrock Rovers beat Partizan Belgrade. For like a Red Star Belgrade to beat Liverpool is unbelievable, really. And they've actually performed reasonably well, because I thought they were going to get thrashed, consistently in the group stages, Red Star, and they've actually been okay. But that shouldn't have happened, and that's the one that could kill them in the end. And Napoli, of course, they're going to sit in a bit, and Liverpool are going to face a test in some way comparable with last night, I think.
Yeah.
Are you good enough to break them down?
And Napoli haven't been beaten. It's not like they're the unbeaten team in the group. There's a quality there.
No, they actually are. I mean, Napoli are top as it stands. I mean, that is the thing. It's not actually a massive shock if they go downfield and get a result. It's probably fair enough.
Yeah, and we definitely have seen this Liverpool team under Klopp struggle against sides that decide to just sit back and go, well, we're going to play for nil all year.
Yeah, and they're good to watch Napoli. I'm not saying they're necessarily going to do that, but it is this sort of the pragmatic thing to do. And I think subconsciously it's going to happen at a particular point in the game anyway.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the challenge for Liverpool, big time.
I mean, if I was Napoli, I would do it from the first second and go, well, we're going to cheat, we're going to dive, we are from the city of Naples, folks.
Yeah, they've conceded 4 goals. Like, they're the best defence in the group, so may as well use some of your strengths.
Yeah, and just looking at the Premier League table as well, so City have scored 40 goals, Liverpool have only scored 26, and there isn't the same sense that this is the swashbuckling team. Like, they've definitely become better defensively in the last 18 months since Van Dijk arrived, but they haven't at the same time maintained the level of rapier-like cutthroat attacking ability that they had. And like, maybe this is just the iteration of the team, maybe this is the difficult middle period and the next period is the progression, but you just need to see the signs of the progression, right? Yeah,
that is the challenge. And I mean, sometimes they're that threading brilliant side on the counter-attack, but if they don't have those opportunities, even the goal last night from Mane, the penalty, it sort of came from a break from a PSG error, but when PSG were a bit deeper, they were sort of comfortable, really.
Yeah, okay. All right, we'll move on from the Champions League and bring you through our breakfast menu this morning. This is what's coming up a little bit later. Andy Dunne's going to join us to talk chess and boxing. We've got the sports news, but we'll bring you through our breakfast menu now. We're going to talk a bit about Irish football's crazy week in a couple of minutes' time. We've got attacking Villa, the 5-5 draw from last night, which I'm sure you're all aware of. The Irish European youngsters, the best Robbie era, and rating Robbie. Is Robbie Keane underrated? It struck me that because he's been retired effectively for quite a period of time in people's minds. There isn't that much fanfare about his official announcement of his retirement.
Yeah, it is his second retirement in a way, though. You know, like that, it was August 2016 when he announced his Irish retirement, and I was just looking back yesterday, even just to see what coverage was like then, just to get a handle, just so we didn't use the same words again. But there was a lot more fanfare then. You know, that was sort of front back page stuff. Now there is still a certain amount today, and
that was the going away at the Aviva.
Yeah, that was the announcement of it, and then the official announcement, and then it was confirmed that he would still play against Oman the following week, and that was the official end. And of course, he had his big farewell, and I mean, in some ways, that is a fitting farewell for Robbie, because Ireland was a massive thing to him, and I think 20 years from now, will we be talking about Robbie's club career or his Irish career? It's possible more so the Irish side of things, because he set a record that's never going to be broken, really, realistically. You know, for someone to get to 68 goals now, they're going to need to break through much earlier than the norms of when players break through. You know, we'll talk a bit about Troy Parrott in a while, but it's very hard for someone to come in, as Robbie did when he was 17.
Debut in 98.
And start scoring goals. I think he scored a couple of goals against Malta in October 98. You know, he scored on his debut for Wolves in 97 against Norwich in a championship game. Yeah. So, and I remember that. I remember the sort of watching those goals whenever highlights program was on, and at the time it didn't seem that unusual, because you had Duff breaking through, and you know, you occasionally have these. Even David Connolly had been around before at a sort of a younger age group. Now the player that does that is going to deal with responsibility, or deal with sort of expectations from the first time he plays. And that is the one thing about Robbie, to answer your question: underrated, overrated. I think maybe we will be able to sit back now and have a bit more of a considered debate about it, because I think when Robbie was playing, and a bit my piece today touched on it a small bit, like for more than half his life, Robbie's been in the spotlight. For pretty much the entirety of his Irish career, everything was expected of him, to the point where the expectations were probably unfair. Like 3 games without a goal and it's a drought, and what's wrong with Robbie? And even, I think Robbie, I don't have this to hand, but I'm pretty sure Kevin Doyle won more Player of the Year awards, until Robbie eventually towards the end, I think, got one to square it up. So even though Robbie was a better player than Kevin Doyle, there was almost a sense that when Kevin Doyle came along, and you know, he had a great story, and you know, a really good fella, and just there was a warmth to his tale, that it was like, oh yeah, Kevin Doyle, he's, you know, what a year. Whereas Robbie was just there the whole time, and sort of taken for granted because of that, you know. Whereas now you sit back and look at the body of work, sit back and see that on Sky at night, you can see as a Premier League 100 all these goals, and I think it was an incredible career, actually. You know, but overrated, underrated. Oh God, I think
I would say vastly underrated, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I'd lean that way. But there were times, I wonder, you know, in his early years, there was so much on his shoulders that maybe there was an expectation created from that what type of player was he? You know, and maybe he had disappointments that were magnified because of his profile.
Yeah, so what type of player was he is actually a really good question. Was he a number 9? Probably not. Was he a number 10? Probably not. He
was somewhere in between.
Yeah.
He was a 9.5, you know, and that is the phases of his career, because I know we're talking about the Robbie era and stuff, and not to sort of jump straight into it, but his best football, ironically enough, was probably played with Berbatov at Spurs, I would say. In that period before his move to Liverpool, he was fantastic.
Yeah.
And yet, like, Berbatov was, I mean, he wore 9, but Berbatov he drifted as well. And they seemed to have this like great understanding between them, that they could mix it up. It wasn't a case of Niall Quinn and Robbie, where one was, you know, he was sort of living off the flicks off the other. They just seemed to have this great natural football understanding. They knew where to pass it. They were 2 really good players. And that actually was probably his best, rather than playing off a big man or playing with a speedster. You know, like it was that was the combination that worked.
Berbatov was a big man, so he had that.
No, he had that ability, I guess. Yeah,
and I don't think that's a coincidence, though. I think that like Berbatov is kind of a Quinn 2.0, and that helps. It definitely feels like that. Also, there's more movement with Berbatov than there would have been with Quinn at that stage of the Quinn era. So the various eras that we're talking about here, which Robbie era was the best. There's breakthrough Robbie, obviously, when he comes in like a firebrand at Wolves, scores those goals, gets the Inter move, and then that fails. And then no point in dressing
Yeah,
up.
but I actually admire now that he gave it a bash. When you think about it.
Marcello Lippi was the coach who brings him and gets sacked immediately. So I don't know, is it Mancini who comes in?
Oh, I'm thinking now, yeah, because I remember there was a variety of strikers there. Was it Recoba and a few others? I remember just the Inter at that time were just, well, like most clubs, top clubs, they had the sort of the 4 or 5 strikers really, and he just seemed to be on the wrong side of the equation. You know, he just never really got that run. You know,
they were a basket case as well at that stage. Like if Lippi had stayed and had brought him in, who knows what would have happened? But then it's Leeds who bring him back. David O'Leary, but that's only a loan deal. So there's
and then he joins them permanently. But then
the fire sale happens.
Yeah, so he joined Spurs, I think, in 2002.
Right.
And he's there for 6 years. That's the longest prolonged spell of his career, basically, until LA Galaxy, which was like quite a long time, but that was sort of peppered by loans and stuff. But that's 6 years at Spurs. Now, it wasn't always perfect at Spurs. I remember him sort of having a tantrum one time. I think it was at Birmingham or one game where he was a sub. He was the third sub was brought on, so Robbie wasn't being brought on. And I remember him sort of, throwing a training top. And for all that Robbie was very expressive on the pitch. And this is one of the things about Robbie. Like Robbie was a footballer in the dressing room. What happens in the dressing room stays in it. That for all the moves and all the transfers that he had, he never really came out publicly and bitched about managers. Even when all went off at Liverpool, it didn't really go his way. And whatever was going on, he would never really come out and air the sort of dirty linen in public.
No.
He was very much what happens behind the door stays behind the door, and that's why managers seem to really like him ultimately, because they could sort of trust him to a degree. But that period with Berbatov is when he really ignited.
Marco Tardelli was the Inter manager.
Was it Tardelli, really?
After Lippi.
Oh, of course. I should know that from Tardelli being asked about when he came in.
Yeah, I'm sure he's laughed it off in his.
He shrugged it off with his 25 words of English and then a little smile at the end. Yeah.
So there's 2 Spurs eras, right? There's it goes Spurs, Liverpool, Spurs. Is that the order?
Yeah. So he went to those 6 months at Liverpool, which again at Liverpool, I mean, this is the thing. Torres was there at the time, and Benitez signed him, but then there was a couple of months in, there was a suggestion that he actually wanted to bring in a midfielder as well too. It hadn't got his way.
Yeah.
And Robbie ended up sort of caught in this
mad
in this sort of
situation.
political game. And I think Robbie said it at the time, he was playing out of position a bit. I mean, this is the question of what was he? What was his actually ideal position? But he felt like he was out of position for periods. I remember
Torres was not a 9.5 or a 9 3/4. Torres was a number 9.
Yeah.
And so he's also one of the best footballers in the world at that point. You're not coming in to kind of get in his way or to do anything other than to be a secondary player in that system.
No, and there was a suggestion that Benitez thought he could develop Keane in some way, and it would have had to be develop him as a bit more of an actual number 10, like an actual sort of a playmaker figure. Because Robbie, even as his career went on, he never ended up even in Galaxy or stuff like that. He never ended up back going even deeper and deeper, into sort of this sort of playmaker mode. He was very much still happier forward, but and even that was the thing. Like even you speak, was he a 9? Then with Ireland in his latter Ireland career, like he couldn't play as that 1 in a 4-5-1. He just couldn't. He didn't have the capabilities to play that role properly. He was isolated, so he sort of. And at Liverpool, I think he spent a few games out wide, and I do remember him scoring a goal against Arsenal in one game, and he still scored a few goals when he was at Liverpool, but just. He wasn't happy there. Went back to Spurs, and his second spell at Spurs didn't really ignite. It didn't really happen from there. I think Redknapp was mainly there, and he had a couple of loan moves within that to Celtic, and I think to West Ham as well. I remember Celtic going over to his debut for Celtic.
That was while he was at Spurs.
Yeah, it was a January deadline deal. I remember going over to watch him play Kilmarnock the following night. And it was a different world. Like it was 4,000 or 5,000 in Kilmarnock, rugby park, rugby pitch almost, and they lost 1-0. And you're thinking, God, what's he got himself in for? But again,
I do feel like a lot of Irish players go to Celtic and think, oh, this is going to be great. I've seen those Champions League nights against Barcelona. It's going to be amazing. Then they get there and they're like, oh my God.
Cameos never really work. Even Roy's short cameo, it doesn't.
It was injury ridden and they got beaten in the cup final.
They didn't. Yeah, he didn't. They didn't win a league the season he was there. Like the one thing about Robbie, and you will say in terms of the underrated, overrated, his honours list is pretty bare. for a player of his ability who did what he did.
All those MLS championships.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That boosted it up. But I think that prior to that, it was just a League Cup with Spurs.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing about his time in America, that he went to the MLS with a great attitude. And that was the key. So many people go over there, the exports, and they're done. Either their body's done or their mind is done, or they're just not. They are patently just there for the cash. And Robbie went over there, and I would have a bit of criticism. And I remember at the time, sort of writing a piece, thinking, like, well, why is he doing this now? Like, he's checking himself out of top level football too early.
Yeah.
But he actually went over there, in fairness to him, and threw himself into it, and he won 3 MLS Cups. And I know it's never going to win the respect of the European audience, no matter how much they try and grow and advance the league. But it's a credit to him that he tried it. And he actually
crack. He lived in Hollywood.
He lived in LA. I mean, really, it wasn't a bad deal. I think even his statement yesterday, speaking about how for a boy coming from Crumlin United to end up in London, LA, Milan, and Glasgow,
he didn't mention Glasgow and Liverpool in the great cities.
They didn't get the mention. No,
they got the mentions as great football citadels or whatever it was.
It was striking that the good cities got a mention. But he lived a good life,
amazing life. Yeah,
he used the skill, and I'm almost a bit surprised because I wondered that he had one more gig in him, but obviously this Ireland thing has come along.
Yeah.
But in the course of the last 18 months, there was speculation listed with China. Well, yeah, Preston, China. That well-known debate. But I don't think he ever really, to be fair, did Robbie even ever really drop down to championship level at all? I don't think he did. I think he pitched himself at a level that he was, if he was going to move on, he was going to go to a different sort of country and try and exist at the top there, rather than going to the grind of, Preston sort of away to Rotherham on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, no.
I think he had an idea of his worth, that he wasn't going to go that route.
Here's Kenny Cunningham talking last night on Off the Ball about his initial impression of a very cheeky Robbie Keane.
Robbie's remarkable confidence.
Yeah.
I remember it was coming over to Ireland for Summery. I think he'd done a show. We were coming over to a game. We came over early. It might have been some talk show in Dublin, and I came with him. I don't know why. It might have been to hold his hand. Literally, Robbie might be only 17, but Robbie's confidence was amazing in his own ability, and I never had that at an early age, and I used to look at Robbie. I could understand to a point in terms of the ability that he had. Of course, that would give you confidence, but even players with kind of great individual skill don't have. Duffers didn't have that kind of self-confidence. He was a wonderful player at an early age, but he didn't have it. A little bit insular, not overly confident himself, but unbelievable ability. But Robbie was different. I mean, just Robbie, the way he carried himself, and that little bit of a strut, shoulders out, even from a very young age.
Yeah.
Amazing, really.
And well liked initially when he had that strut and he arrives on the scene with the strut, or did people think, hang on, who's this?
Oh, no, the lads loved him.
Okay.
Because, you back it up, that's the thing. You come in with the strut and start giving the Billy, But
Billy
you can't.
Time.
Yeah, you can't back it up then, you fall flat in your face, but, you get ridiculed, but he could back it up and always did.
Yeah. There was Niall Quinn told a story in his book where it was early on when Keane was in the camp and they was just warming up before training. They're doing loads of tricks, and he said that Robbie caught, Quinn said, me looking at him, and he knew I was looking at him, and then out of nowhere he starts going, "Watch this, old man. Can you do this, old man?" And starts doing all the flicks and tricks. Do you want to try that, old man? And again, Quinn sort of said, you couldn't but love him. But it's a tightrope to walk that kind of strut.
Yeah. You can see why that would be infectious, especially now. If someone walk in, well, maybe now he'd get kicked up in the air by everybody going, hang on a second.
I don't know. Well, I mean, I think we're talking about, say, Troy Parrott now, who's coming along. I can only imagine the energy that Robbie brought to that group, and you do hear the lads of that vintage, and pretty much what Kenny and the Niall Quinn story and that Robbie just naturally walked in and he just took control of that group, and he always seemed like a powerful figure in that group in terms of how they spoke about him. That even by 2002 here, so how old was Robbie in 2002? 21, 22 maybe?
That all, yeah.
But it was almost like he was a leader of some kind, sort of beneath it all at that stage.
Yeah. What's your favourite? I mean, so that we've just put the picture up. If you're just listening to the podcast, that we just put the picture up of him wheeling away in celebration, having just about to do, I think, the cartwheel, having scored the equaliser against Germany in the World Cup.
That is the one, yeah.
The penalty against Spain, he takes the penalty that equalises?
He did, yeah, after the earlier miss. That took balls.
That did take balls.
Yeah, even, I always...
He should have taken the first penalty.
I know.
Would have saved Kevin Kilbane a lot of heartache.
A lot of grief, yeah. It might have cost him a few gigs over the years, though, to be fair. So, I mean, it all evens up over time. Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about favourite moments or goals, I mean, I actually loved the goal in Paris. In the playoff.
Yeah,
It's sort of forgotten. I mean, actually,
that's one of our best ever goals.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Now, there was nothing remarkable about what Robbie did, except that is everything about what he is.
Yeah.
That he just sort of hung back into the right position and stuck it away. Now, I think actually he did miss a chance in the second half, or was it Duff who missed a chance? But Robbie actually missed a good chance too in the second half of that game. Which
I want to say John O'Shea. It's Paris. You're asking. Was
no,
there a chance?
No. That was 04. No, in the playoff.
I think John O'Shea missed. I think he's done it twice.
No, because O'Shea went off in the Paris game. McShane come on for O'Shea. O'Shea actually ended up getting this sort of clot, a very unusual injury that kept him out for a period of time. But no, Duff actually missed a very good chance, but I think Robbie missed one too. But I mean, anyway, that goal was that was also sort of a great moment, that it would him who would be the player to finish that team move.
Yeah.
But plenty of great club goals too. I mean, I love watching, as I said, those Premier League videos, those reviews. I mean, talking to Stephen Kelly at a gig last night, and he recalled a goal he scored for Blackburn, where he sort of, I guess, against Blackburn, where he sort of outfoxed a couple of players and smashed it in. And I got into a bit of a YouTube sort of trap last night looking at some of them, and some pretty outrageous goals.
I stuck the goal up from the game in Amsterdam. So it was Ireland beat Holland 1-0. It was their last warm-up for the Euros.
04, yeah.
And that Dutch team was sensational.
And that was from outside the box as well, wasn't it, that goal?
Picked the ball up inside his own half.
I kind of wonder how many goals he scored from outside. I think it was a 325 or something career goal. I think that was at club level. I saw someone put that up yesterday. I kind of wonder how many were still outside the area, though.
Yeah. Not many.
No.
I'm now in my own YouTube hole here, just looking at the goal in that game against France.
Come on, Jerry, I have to do the show here. You can't be looking at you'll get stuck. There'll be more. You just lead on to more.
The football is sensational. Like, we just got the ball inside our own half, pass, Duffer with a 1-2, and then Robbie's just standing there,
with
not
Kilbane,
moving.
to be fair, yeah, the 1-2 with Kilbane.
Was it? Yeah. I was wondering why the ball was overhit.
It was a bit overhit, yeah. It was like Neymar sending Mbappe away. He just knew he was going to scamper into space.
Come on, Kev. Now, so just one last point on this before we get on to Troy Parrott, right? If Robbie Keane is underrated, Damien Duff is still better.
You think?
I do. I think that Duffer wins leagues in one of the best teams that there's been to win leagues in England.
See, Duffer had a better club career, but Robbie probably had a better Irish career. And so what's the measure of it? What's the measure of I think, I mean, Duff, at his peak was, I would argue about Duff that not the best, but at his peak, the most exciting Irish player nearly ever. Because you described the other great Irish players, but they were more they were brilliant. Keane, Brady, Giles. But in terms of actual sort of thrill a minute value, Duff was just, when he was in full flight around 02, we've never had anything like that.
Yeah.
But there was a consistency, a repetitiveness about Robbie did that was never going to leave you sort of jumping off your seat at times, but he just kept doing it. Yeah, I maybe would lean towards Duff in that argument, all right, but it feels like you're chipping away at two great careers. It feels almost unfair that to make the argument you have to be unkind about someone, whereas that's not really the point.
You're nitpicking about greatness, really. So, and that's I guess that's part of our job sometimes. All right, well, you can all get involved in that conversation if you want. You can tweet us here at Off the Ball AM. Let's talk a little bit about Irish underage stars. You were saying that you were going to go to a game last night between the Spurs under 19.
Spurs and Inter Milan. So it's the UEFA Youth League. So it's obviously the UEFA Youth League is on the same sort of pattern as the Champions League or the senior games. So they play earlier in the day. So I was half tempted to go to that game until all the Irish stuff kicked off, because it wasn't just Troy Parrott who's there in the picture for people looking at the streaming. It's Ryan Nolan as well, who's the captain of the Inter Milan Youth League team, who's born in Clare, grew up in Clare, and moved to Spain when he was 9, and eventually has made his way to Inter Milan. So you have Ryan Nolan on one side and Troy Parrott, who's the 16-year-old wonder kid, Belvedere, who's gone to Spurs, scored a lot of goals in the under-17 Euros last year, and now, even though he's still only 16, he's 17 in February, he's playing under-19 for Ireland. He got a favourable mention from Martin O'Neill. He's been with the under-23s at Spurs as well, and he scored a brilliant goal in the game yesterday, which people can look up and they can find it. I think it was on BT. So, expectation is deeply unfair for someone of that age, but he is the name.
Get him in the team. What are you talking about?
Well, he's Stephen Kenny mentioned him the other day,
right?
In his press conference, and Stephen Kenny would have Belvedere links. He would be very aware of Troy Parrott's story, and there is a sort of a nice symmetry when the day that Robbie Keane retires, you have an Irish kid at Spurs scoring a goal for Spurs in a big enough game, albeit at youth level. And he is only 16. He's younger than Robbie was when he broke through.
Was that a captain's armband on
Ryan Nolan's?
Yeah.
Ryan Nolan was wearing. Yeah, Ryan Nolan is the captain. He's a centre half, and he is the captain of that Inter Milan youth side as well, and he would have been involved with their team in pre-season. Now, Nolan actually, he's overage for the Irish under-19s, and he hasn't been involved in the 21s. So I would say for Stephen Kenny, that would also be someone to go and watch. I remember speaking to Tom Mohan recently. He did an event and actually said when Nolan was younger, there was probably centre halves they rated higher than them. So right. Declan Rice would have been one of them, and a couple of others. But Nolan just seems to have gone to. He's in Italy now. Boy from Clare playing on he's on the books of Inter Milan. So we'll see. I mean, sometimes unfortunately playing, at a high level, at youth level for a top club does not mean it can mean nothing. Yeah. Those players are littered everywhere now, and the next Seamus Coleman becomes your star. Yeah. But still, I think Parrott is a player who seems to have a knack. He's a great dead ball specialist. He's more of a number 10 maybe than a number 9. But at least it's good to have a name.
Goal scoring number 10 would be a welcome addition.
Yeah, but we're in no position to turn any of them down, Ger.
Okay, just want to talk about the Villa game last night. Finished 5-5, Villa 2-0 down after about 8 minutes in this, and then it was 2-2 15 minutes in. A man gets sent off, Villa take the lead, and then there's a last minute winner, or last minute equaliser for Forest. Crazy.
We're down to 10, I think Forest were, weren't they?
Crazy game.
It's sort of an old school, like 1960s result. It's sort of you don't get many 5-alls these days.
No, almost never.
I think of many 5-alls. So I remember some high scoring draws, and the Spurs Man City game many years back that might have been 5-4, and a few like that. But Villa seem to have got a bit of spark back. Dean Smith's come in.
Well, so here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to bring this up was that Steve Bruce was there. They were playing crap football, not getting the best out of their players. We just don't have the players. We should just get used to mediocrity. Dean Smith comes in and the team's like, actually, we can get the ball and keep the ball.
Yeah, and Brentford, his Brentford team were really good to watch and really good side, and Scott Hogan scored a lot of goals there. And actually for the poacher type players, they do a lot of attacking around the opposition penalty area and they play a particular style of play. So, he's a Villa fan as well, Dean Smith. He's one of their own as such. Yeah. And they had the derby win at the weekend against Birmingham, but there is a real sense that they can get going and push up, but they can also entertain, and that papers over a lot of cracks if people are being entertained, because you go to Villa, it's a great club. I really like going to Villa. They're getting 30,000 people. I remember there a couple of years ago when they were 17th in the Championship, that first year when they struggled. Some massive crowds going to the games. They just needed something to seize onto.
Yeah, so I guess I'm saying that a change of manager can really have a massive impact.
It can change the perception of a team very quickly.
Bring the good times back. That's all we want, Big Mick. That and qualification for the Euros that are going to happen in Ireland. And then Irish football's crazy week. Are we drawing a veil over this now and saying enough is enough? We've had what? So the takeaways from the week are that. I haven't talked to you about this.
No,
Stephen Kenny, where do you think?
I think it's fantastic that Kenny's going to be involved. There's no doubt that this has been thrown together a small bit, and there's definitely reasons that it's been thrown together, but I am starting to come around to this is so crazy, it might almost work. And so I might be cynical about the rationale behind it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can look at it and say, well, this is going to be a disaster. The one thing, the argument is, well, what if Mick does really well? And I haven't really, to me, right, 24 teams qualify for the next Euros. 13 qualify from Europe for the next World Cup, and Infantino gets it bigger. Mick said during the week that his regret is that he didn't leave after the 2002 World Cup, and he wants this job to propel him towards another 10 years like Neil Warnock, effectively, who he mentioned during the week. If Ireland get to the Euros and do well, the best play for Mick McCarthy probably is to leave, because if
We're not going to qualify for the World Cup.
It's going to be very, very difficult to qualify for the World Cup. And if Mick leaves on a low of having not qualified for something, then I think with his reputation, it'll be harder for him to sell that as a bounce factor to get him into a better job than he was before.
Yeah.
So honestly, that side of it, I can sort of deal with it. I think for Kenny, it's an unusual one, the situation that he's in. But I think getting someone like him in the door who can have a link between the league here and the international team is something that we need to do. And again, there was definitely a hugely, let's give everyone what they wanted last week about what happened. And I definitely think that was a play. But at the same time, it's got someone in there who now has a real link to the game here, and everyone in the league here should be lifted by that. Because if he comes to the game, it's not tokenism.
No,
it's his genuine belief.
And he's like, he reckons he wants to see these players. But here's the thing about, if the wrong candidate was I want to give everybody what they want is the impetus. If that is the case, if the wrong candidate had got the job, then that would be a disaster. But it turns out if you get the right candidate, however you end up there, is it a disaster that we're going to have somebody who knows what the future holds for him and spends 2 years going around the world talking to the best managers and having conversations with them and going to all those UEFA conferences and seeing what the coaching trends are, understanding what the ebb and flow of organising international teams is at a very low risk level? It's not. This is like it's a PhD in international football.
It's an investment in him. It is an investment in him, and I just think
first time ever we've done that.
Yeah, it's awkward for Mick, but I think that there's in some ways
he's a big man.
That can be used as a positive, and he's not going to have to deal with this halfway through of is your contract going to be extended and all this sort of noise that goes with that gig. It's focused.
A lot of people were very against the notion of Mick McCarthy getting the job because there is a debate. The players who play for him love him, absolutely. They will run through brick walls for him. But those of us who watched the football and covered the football at that time were very sceptical about Mick McCarthy as a manager. Now, what he's done at club level, I don't know on a week-to-week basis if you can extrapolate the 5 big matches a year in international football versus a season in the Championship. They're different jobs. They're completely different jobs. So let's wait and see how good he is. But everybody who's sceptical of him at least knows there's an end point.
Yeah, that's true.
No one's piling in on day one going, wow, this guy's a complete joker.
He's got to go.
It's like, okay, well, fair enough. Let's all hope that he does well here, and let's talk about the issues around the team, see if he's fixing those, have those conversations, and hopefully at the same time maintain we need to improve the quality of the league.
Yeah, well, that's the broader debate, because where we're going is a future where it needs to become more important than it is at the moment. I think everyone acknowledges, well, most people acknowledge that. Now, there's still that small minority who think we should just splash out on this glamour manager and that's it. That doesn't work. That catches up with you over time. That's been our solution for years, and it's not a lasting one.
Okay, let's move on. Going to get Darren in to bring you through the news of the day. Here is Mike Ross talking about why Greg Feek is such an important member of the Irish backroom team.
I rate him very highly. I think I first met Greg when he came into Leinster around 2010, and we didn't have a scrum coach. Okay, so straight away that was a big step up in my eyes, and I suppose I had particular ideas about scrummaging before then, and he really forced me to step back and take a look at what we're doing and why we were doing it, and could we do it a better way. He's very detail oriented, a bit like Joe, so he'll spend a few hours going over scrums and looking. He'll have a camera above the scrum so you can see how it locks and the back five are linking up. And I'll tell you a story that kind of shows his attention to detail. So when we were playing England, and Feeky noticed that Joe Marler on his bind would move his head slightly to the right, and he told me this. He said, look, if you put your head across there, it'll block him and you won't be able to swing round and it'll depower him. Okay, so I did that and it worked an absolute treat. And this is because he was looking at video above and noticed it. It was just slight. So Joe just bring his head out to the left a bit, and I just put my head across when he did that, and then he couldn't attack me the way he liked to. So he'll be a big loss, but he was responsible for a lot of knowledge sharing around the provinces. There would be kind of scrum forums. I know this because I went to a couple of them, where scrum coaches would from all over the provinces get together and share knowledge and drills. And it's no accident that we've a glut of props coming through at the moment.
Yeah, loads of props coming through at the moment. We'll talk rugby with Andy Dunne in a couple of minutes' time. First, Darren is here. Darren, how are you?
I'm very well, Jared. This morning, it's not such a good morning for Liverpool fans and their manager Jurgen Klopp, unimpressed with PSG. He believes they played dirty to win last night. The German unhappy with how their players behaved during the 2-1 Champions League defeat in Paris. The Reds have dropped to third in their group after the defeat. Liverpool can still go through if they beat Napoli 1-0 or by 2 clear goals in a fortnight's time. The Merseysiders shown 6 yellow cards in a match littered with fouls and free kicks.
Can I just ask about this? Sorry, you were about to play a clip there and I've interrupted you.
That's okay.
We'll get back to it, sorry. Shut up, right? Club. If you're like, they played dirty to win? No? Like, what are you doing? You're now giving everybody templates how to beat you and you're going to react to it. No? You're not playing, there's no second leg here. You don't get the benefit of that given out about the referee the next time, do you?
I think the problem is that in that moment, it's hard to give your considered thoughts when you haven't had time to consider it. I think he's a very emotional guy. Every time he speaks, it seems to be, he probably thinks after he says it. And that's obviously going to be problematic when he's a little bit disappointed or angry and saying something.
Is there niggling frustration of how they lost the Champions League last year as well to this cynical?
And do that in the pre-season and go, I'm watching you, everybody, I'm coming for you. Why don't we do a little bit of ourselves?
Well, yeah, that is the question, you know.
It's the emotive language that gets the headlines, and that's probably what runs him into a bit of trouble. And the word he used yesterday was that they look like butchers. Have a look.
It was clear that the start will be like the start was, especially when you saw the lineup. The approach they chose was full risk, especially in the beginning. Try everything as long as your legs carry you. But the quality they have, obviously quite intense to deal with. The number of interruptions in that game was just not cool. I said it a few times. We 2 times in a row we won the fair play table, whatever, in England. And tonight we look like butchers when you look for after the yellow cards we had.
When you're pointing out your fair play title, it's probably losing.
Yeah, we look like butchers when we had the yellow cards. So they have the yellow cards because the opposition are cheating. That's his point?
That is the point I think he's trying to get around.
We're
not a dirty team. We won all the fair play awards. Now tonight we look like
that's
butchers.
fair enough. But like, you can't be giving out about them diving when it's like, you've watched every video. We know you've watched every video. We know you've seen them do it millions of times. We know you've seen Neymar before. What do you expect from him?
Yeah, I think, and then we touched on it earlier, once they went behind, they left themselves open to that situation. If they'd started the game better, PSG got in control, and that's what happens. It's a sort of it's a lesson.
Yeah.
Elsewhere last night, Tottenham's Champions League fate back in their own grasp. Christian Eriksen's goal 10 minutes from time gave them a 1-0 win at home to Inter. Elsewhere, a Leo Messi wonder goal helped Barca along to a 2-1 win at PSV. Atletico Madrid and Borussia Dortmund have guaranteed progress from Group A with a game to spare each. Atletico 2-0 winners at home to Monaco. Dortmund and Bruges drew a blank. Porto have already won Group D with a game to spare following a 3-1 victory at home to Schalke. But Schalke are guaranteed second spot after Galatasaray were beaten 2-0 at Lokomotiv Moscow. Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, the game that's garnered, I suppose, most of the love on OTB AM this morning. A 10-goal thriller in an extraordinary championship encounter at Villa Park last night. 5 of the goals came in the first 22 minutes. The visitors had led 3 times. They had a man sent off. 2 goals disallowed late on for the home side. Both teams earned a point. The match finished 5-5. Tammy Abraham grabbed 4 goals for Villa in that match. With a point, Forest leap above Derby in the championship table. They lost 2-1 at 10-man Stoke. West Brom 4th following a 2-1 win at Swansea. Bristol 3-2 victors away to bottom side Ipswich Town. Wigan saw off Blackburn on a scoreline of 3-1. Birmingham 2-0 winners away to 10-man Millwall as well. While Harry Arter believes the players let Republic of Ireland manager Martin O'Neill down badly, O'Neill paid the price for the team's current plight as he was axed following relegation in the Nations League and an 11-game run of internationals that included just 1 victory. The midfielder feels O'Neill deserves more credit for his achievements and claims the majority of the team underperformed over the last year.
I don't know about the other players, but I know I certainly do. I think it's very easy for players to blame managers when results haven't gone well. But I think the most important thing is for players, if they can come off the pitch and look at themselves in the mirror and say, yeah, I've done everything today. And I'd say for the last year or so, maybe 1 or 2 players each game can do that. I'd say I feel quite disappointed with some of my games for Ireland. Whatever the reason may be, it just, on the night just didn't perform as well as I could have. And I know that's probably the case for a lot of the other players. I feel Martin's successes for Ireland have been, unbelievable. Some of the games that have been involved in the Germany game sticks out at home, and then obviously qualifying for the Euros, was a lot harder than people expect. So I think Martin deserves a lot more credit and a lot more praise for what he done for this group of players.
He's a thoughtful, clever guy, Harry Arter. It would have helped if he showed up for those other games in the middle of it, though. Maybe he could have had an impact.
There's just something about those comments just sort of grated a small bit, He also think he said something about Martin always picked me when I was fit. I was pretty sure he was fit for the 2 games last, the fortnight ago when Cyrus Christie was playing instead.
Yeah.
I would like to mic Harry Arter up on the bench for either of those games, and we'll see if he would have been presenting such a polished verdict on the a bit like talking about the Jurgen Klopp quotes there after the match. I'd say Harry Arter after either of the 2 games.
If we could have got him.
I'm not sure if it would have been as articulate and measured in his comment. I think even Roy Keane got a nice mention there. I mean, come on. I mean, you weren't here in September. You didn't actually come here
because of your issues with that. Roy Keane is a human.
Yes, and with the managerial group as such. So I'm not too sure about that.
There's a bit of contradiction there as well, because he says players need to take more responsibility, and then he says we've all underperformed. I don't know why. So you want to take responsibility and then you refuse to even try and put an answer.
Well, it's
on
manager.
Why you're
it's
not
a manager. He's playing the manager.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Yeah, he's been asked about it in the context of it, but he definitely could have done more at times, Harry Arter. To be fair,
it's like I agree I should take responsibility, but I'm not going to take responsibility right now. Hurling and camogie have been added to UNESCO's list of protected cultural activities this morning. The games among the oldest field sports in the world and have been included on the list of activities that fall under the category of intangible cultural heritage. Camogie, considered by UNESCO a form of hurling played by women, also protected in the new status. By adding hurling to the list, the Government of Ireland has committed to keeping the game alive, ensuring respect for it and raising awareness about its importance. The main objective of UNESCO is to continue to contribute towards peace and security in the world by promoting collaboration among nations through education, science, culture and communication. The group defines intangible cultural heritage as the practices, representations, expressions, knowledge and skills that communities, groups and individuals recognise as part of their cultural heritage. In their description of hurling, UNESCO describe it as hurling or camogie is a field game played by 2 teams which dates back 2,000 years and features strongly in Irish mythology, most notably in the epic saga of Cuchulainn. It is played throughout the island of Ireland, particularly in more fertile agricultural areas, as well as overseas. Hurling is considered an intrinsic part of Irish culture and plays a central role in promoting health and well-being.
Go back to the fertile agricultural bit there, sorry. What? Go back.
Hurling is played throughout the island of Ireland, particularly in more fertile agricultural areas.
So that's like Tipperary, fertile agricultural.
Hurling is for the country folk of Ireland.
Who wrote this UNESCO press release?
Unfortunately, I think the problem is UNESCO wrote it.
Yeah.
Also added to the list today, we've had some kind of Korean wrestling and reggae music of Jamaica also protected.
Oh yeah, hurling and reggae together at last.
Yeah, and uilleann piping too. Uilleann piping got in there a little while ago. So big day, I suppose, that the government and GAA have committed never to let hurling die.
The YouTube wormhole I'm in has taken me to the Robbie goal, but obviously I just hit play there to see what happens. The next bit is obviously the Thierry Henry handball. He was offside from the free kick. From the free kick that comes into the penalty area, he's offside.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know that. I thought there was just the handball.
You found a new angle on the handball, Jerry. That's pretty impressive.
What?
9 years on, there's another scandal.
The grassy knoll angle.
Oh, where was McShane? I mean, let's go through it all again.
It bounced. I can't believe it bounced. Should Shane not have come for it?
Oh, you possibly could have. Yeah, I mean, it was just all wrong on all kinds of levels.
His footing was too wrong. He couldn't get there.
I've never asked Shay about that. What are you saying, Joe? He said somebody saying he's onside because the second face because there's a flick on. Okay.
Oh yeah, actually, was there a flick at the near post by someone? I've tried to erase this memory.
No, but it's not a direct free kick from there. Why are they putting the offside line up? There are definitely like 2 French players offside when the ball is taken from the free kick. And back then, one of them is Thierry Henry, who the ball goes to. So.
This reminds me of the Wikipedia description of the Saipan saga as prolonged national self-examination.
Oh, Jesus
We're doing
Christ.
the prolonged national self-examination again.
It's such a little kind of a dink. I mean, it's a thing.
I can't believe we're going through this again. Would you believe what he did next?
Yeah. It's a thing of beauty. It is an absolute thing of beauty.
Can I save us from this?
Why didn't we just sit down? Why didn't we just sit down on the pitch in the style of Roy Jones Jr. at the Olympic Games? Just sit down.
And protest.
No, we're not going anywhere.
No, we were like, we're going to leave this in the hands of our officials. They'll get us out of this one with a solution of some kind.
Oh my God. All right.
Russia have refused to allow the World Anti-Doping Agency access to the Moscow lab at the centre of the country's state-sponsored doping scandal. The Russians have put the lab in the building on lockdown and are blocking international access since November 2015, when investigators from WADA first uncovered proof of Russia's cheating. They say they are conducting their own investigation first into the scandal. Allowing WADA investigate the scene of the crime was one of the conditions of the reinstatement to international competition. But the Russians continue to stall, WADA say. Well, Ger, follow up on yesterday's story. Fernando Lafuente said he had no role in faking his own death. Ballybrack FC's Leinster Senior Football League clash with our club postponed last Saturday after Lafuente passed away in a car accident on Thursday evening. It subsequently transpired that he moved to Galway instead. He confirmed that members of the club had contacted him last night. To Heller to Connacht. He confirmed that members of the club had contacted him last night to offer an apology. The club say an individual made a gross error of judgment in claiming Fernando was dead.
A grave error of judgment.
A grave error of judgment, a gross error of something else. But these comments from Fernando are pretty interesting. He gave an interview in which he confirmed he was not dead, but also said that he was under the understanding that while he thought they were going to say something happened to him, he thought it would be a broken leg. So was it just one rogue man if Fernando was in on it? Have a listen.
I actually find out I was dead yesterday around 8 p.m. when I got a call from work. So basically our CEO was in San Francisco and he found out this news because he's like a rugby player and he's onto sports and everything. So he contacted our CTO, like, is Fernando okay? Have we heard from him today? Is everything fine? Luckily, I was all day working with the CTO, so he knew I was okay. He just phoned me and told me, man, you're all over the newspapers. You're a celebrity now. I'm not that good at football. I'm average. And I'm not the kind of football you guys play here with really hard kicks and a little bit physical kind of football. Yeah, I knew I was going to have an accident, but I thought like I was going to break a leg or I was going to be, any kind of accident, like, seamlessly, like no one would have cared that much. So they told me like, just if you see anything on Twitter or whatever, just to let you know, we try to get this match called off, and that's it.
Okay, that's post fact post fact rationalisation from here. Listen, we got rumbled here, right? Just ignored it. We told him you had a broken leg or something.
But he says I knew I was going to have an accident.
He suggested that, yeah, he did.
Is that not like a linguistic?
I knew I was going to have an accident before it. That he was dead.
No, I think it's like, I knew I was going to have an accident, I didn't know I was going to be dead. When they ring him and they say, here, listen, this thing has kind of exploded.
But they only rang him after he was dead.
Yeah, exactly. So they ring him after he's dead and they say, here, listen, you're going to have an accident. Like, I thought maybe it was, here, listen, Fernando, we might have said that you had an accident to get the game called off. Just play along, okay? He's like, oh, okay. And then, do you know what I mean with the language, the continuous... the continuous present in Spanish is a bit different than it is in English.
I mean, can we slow it down and look at it from a different angle instead?
We just can't analyse this to death, eh? But yeah, if the FBI have a sense of humour, they'll put Fernando up on the screen before the next game when they're doing all the sort of multiple things they do before every match. Just stick his picture in there. I mean, come on. I think a lot would be forgiven if they could do that.
That would be great.
Darren, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. More from Darren a little bit later on. There's the Thierry Henry handball and the William Gallas lads.
No replay screens in the press box there, so
you didn't know what had happened.
No, so actually one or two of the Sunday papers who were there, they had nothing to do, obviously, so they ran over to the TV section and described to us what had happened. So It was like it sounds mad, but it's like pre sort of full social media. So it was, I know fans that were there in the away section, that it was only from home that they were being told what happened. They weren't seeing videos of it, but God, I didn't think we'd go there today, Ger. Although I did actually bring it up, so I really can't complain. But
there you go. Okay, so Tommy Bowe and Mike Ross were on the show last night. We've heard a bit from Mike Ross already. Here's Tommy Bowe talking about Andy Farrell's ability to inspire players on the training ground.
He has a great presence about him. I think I read Rory Best speaking about it as well this week, talking about how when he asks you to do something, he has a great way of making it connect with you. He has a great way of showing the sort of passion and what it means to him. And in turn, as a player, it kind of rubs off on you. And, I think that as a leader, I know I was listening to one of the English players saying recently that because all teams have so many leaders now, a captain isn't important. But I can see, with the likes of a Paul O'Connell or Rory Best or an Andy Farrell when he was with England, you can see how they're so successful, because somebody who has that sort of figure at the top, who paints a picture of what you all want to follow as a team, makes it so much easier. And I think him going into the head coaching role, it will be very different. It'll be interesting to see how he takes that on board. But certainly my experience with him has been really positive.
Yeah. Mike, you'd have dealt with him more around Carton House, I presume. Andy Farrell, give us your impressions of him as a coach firstly, and then as a personality.
Well, first of all, he's a big guy. He's about 6'3" that way. And interestingly enough, when I was starting off in Harlequins, I played a game against him. I think he was playing for Sarries at the time. Yeah. So, yeah, he's impressive in the flesh, and he's a very clear picture of how he wants things to be done. He's working in the defence. He was, he's very specific about how he wanted you to defend, and if you have that clarity, it makes things easier. Now, how is he going to go as a head coach? Not sure. I mean, if he's anything like he went as a defensive coach, I think it could be very good for us. And I suppose everyone has to start somewhere as a head coach. So I think he'll do well.
Yeah, so obviously Andy Farrell is rising in a year's time to be the Ireland head coach.
Yeah, I don't know what the view is on the rugby succession plan. I wonder, is there a different take towards it because things are going so well at the moment that you presume it's going to be fine because it's in good hands.
Yeah.
Whereas he doesn't have much experience of actually being a head coach, right? So
no.
I'm just trying to think how this flips in such a way that if things start slowly, is there a point of this is it? They didn't think this through. I mean, they just assumed
they rushed into it.
Yeah, this sort of leadership figure is gone, and we assumed that everything beneath would be fine. But actually, maybe we needed a more experienced presence in terms of actually this responsibility. I don't know.
Yeah, I think talking to a lot of people, they have a former international head coach right there who is literally metaphorically tearing up trees and is literally the talk of European rugby at the moment. Everybody wants to get their hands on Stuart Lancaster because of what he's done at Leinster. Jamie Heaslip has come out and said it. Johnny Sexton's come out and said it, that the level of coaching they're getting from Stuart Lancaster is as good as anything they've ever had. The comparison is Joe Schmidt, and so they're this is at least as good. And the RFU have decided that they're going to go with what's already in the international system and try and build on that, as opposed to going, we two used to work together. I mean, I'm sure they made that call at some point.
It's such a hard act to follow, and I think that there's such a level of expectation being built now that no matter what you do next, it might never be good enough. I mean, it's sort of bringing it more to my parish, but see, Dundalk have to replace Stephen Kenny, no matter who, and they're going to replace from within, right? That's the way they're going to do it.
That's the plan.
That is the plan.
Yeah.
But no matter, I think it's going to be Vinnie Perrott, who's the assistant at the moment, but they need to get a pro licence holder onto the management team. But I think it's going to be the current backroom staff are going to lead the way forward. And the whole argument is, well, you've created such a great, and he's created a great dressing room, great people, good characters. And I think in their meetings since, their whole chat has been, well, in a nice way, let's prove that it wasn't just a one-man thing, let's bring it forward. And that's the whole argument, is you've got good people there and it's working, and that's great. But you don't have that credit in the bank from the start.
No.
And the minute the first thing goes wrong, and it could be to do with something completely different while you've lost a particular game, but it will be pegged as, we've lost the magic that was there before. And that's it. And that's what you're going to face in the rugby one as well, that it's...
What they've done is give him a 4-year deal, though, all the way through to the next World Cup. So...
but that's fine in theory, though. But you've one bad year and...
I guess what you can do is you can say, I don't know, you can't really blah, blah, blah a Six Nations if you've come off a bad World Cup, and you can't blah, blah, blah a Six Nations if you come off a brilliant World Cup. It's we're at bat, we need to win.
But surely if the next World Cup goes badly for Ireland, there's going to be a massive hangover, though, because you've got such a long time to put this one thing that hasn't been done.
Well, that's
right. So all of a sudden it just becomes draining and demoralising that it's 4 years away.
Yeah, I think the way a bad World Cup would transpire would be injuries to key players. If everybody's fit and we have a bad World Cup, then that is a massive full-blown crisis.
Yeah, it is, and it's a massive hangover then that happens. And how do you sort of muster? I think that's the next challenge, in the rugby sense, that because Ireland becomes so good at winning the Six Nations now, that there comes a point where that isn't enough anymore. That it does lose its sparkle.
Well, you've got to do the Grand Slam, and
it's a tough gig. It's obviously because things are going so well. and maybe I'm not reading it all, that hasn't,
This is the most successful period that we've ever had in international rugby. Like,
there's an assumption it's just going to work.
It's very hard. It's very hard to follow that. Like, it is very hard to follow that. And it's about maintaining that and seeing how long you can make it last. Because at some point, you stop being the best team in this part of the world, and you stop being one of the 2 best teams. You would assume that we're not going to always be one of the 2 best teams in world rugby.
It's hard to keep it going. There's always has to be some new summit to scale, and that is going to be the next phase of the test, I would have thought.
Yeah. Who was it? Conquered the mountain and then was like, what other worlds are there for me? Was it Muhammad?
Oh. I know there's a Muhammad Mountain story there somewhere, but I wouldn't like to speculate, Ger.
What other worlds are there left for me to conquer? What's that one? Like, what do you do? I mean, that's kind of like you go on and leave sport and become a commentator or get into concert.
Well, that's for an individial person.
Yeah, but
I suppose a team's collective...
countries, nation... Okay, we've won the World Cup, that's it. No more rugby, we're finished.
Hey, listen, I'd be up for that.
Alexander the Great, that was it, yeah. Good man, thanks, Joseph. Robbie Keane should have retired the green jersey much earlier than he did. Extremely selfish to cling on. This hampered the development of younger strikers coming through, says Terry, with the hottest of hot takes on the morning that Robbie Keane has announced his retirement.
Well, the one thing about Robbie, there was always this fear that there would be an eruption. I would say in his favour, there would have been this fear there was going to be an eruption when he was dropped eventually. And in fairness to Martin O'Neill, because obviously there's everything's very negative about Martin O'Neill's tenure now, but I actually thought that he did manage phasing Robbie out of the team quite well, in that Robbie was dropped effectively for the game against Germany where Shane Long scored the goal, and he ran onto the pitch at full time to hug Shane Long. I think there was a sense of he probably had to be seen. I can't imagine he was that happy about the whole situation, and then went to the Euros and didn't. Now you could argue should he have gone to the Euros, but he still went and was brought on.
He was injured in the build-up and that.
He would never have started any game there really, but he was a big presence around the dressing room, and he seemed to handle it better than people thought that he might have.
It seems at some point along the way he realised that this is a valuable experience, that I might have to do this sometime as a manager. Like, it seemed like he had already decided that he wanted to be a manager at that point. Was he not dropped for the game in Glasgow? Was that the first time he was dropped?
Oh, you could be right, actually. Yeah.
And that was kind of...
Because he went with the Bruce brothers in that game. He went with like Walters and Long and a 4-4-2 in that game. I remember very much for the particular game.
And we got beaten by Sean Maloney.
The short corner. Yeah, I can't actually remember now if Robbie was dropped. Maybe he was.
Feeling that there was a minor controversy about the fact that Robbie wasn't told that, like...
Yeah, that does actually ring a bell now that you mention it. But then he came back in, but he was very much firmly dropped. And then like the Bosnia playoffs and stuff, there was a sense that Robbie now just doesn't play.
Yeah,
that's the situation. And it just, the transition was a bit better.
And in fairness, I think he got a lot of respect for the fact that he continued to show up instead of just going, because a few years previously he'd said, "Oh look, when I'm not wanted here, I won't come anymore."
And that was the belief that this is actually a tough one. And I think even trapped towards the end, there might have been times where you felt like he might have wanted to drop Robbie and didn't. And O'Neill seemed to manage that situation a bit better.
Kevin says it would be nice to see Troy Parrott included in the next squad with the senior team. Hashtag OTB AM. It's too soon.
I mean, it would be nice, but actually I think if you have... This is the one thing about succession plan that you can spin it in a positive sense, that if you get Stephen Kenny 2 years to work with Troy Parrott, so that when they get into the senior dressing room, both of them, there's a relationship there. There's no issues over respect or winning someone over in some way.
Yeah.
There's an understanding. I mean, Ireland hosts the Under-17 European Championships next year, and Parrott is still eligible for that, even though he's with the 19s. You just can't go too mad in terms of fast-tracking people.
No.
Like you can burn them out and have them playing for every age group and stuff. So... I mean, he's still only 17 in February, so maybe chill out a small bit.
17 last February?
No, this February coming.
All right.
So, I mean, let's just be mindful of... I think there's a merit in bringing him in at some degree, but they are qualifiers all the way now as well. So,
what age is Obafemi?
Obafemi is 18 already.
Right.
Yeah, so, but Parrott is actually at under 19 level... has scored more goals, I think, than Obafemi has, although Obafemi hasn't been present for, he's missed a couple of camps.
Okay. This one here, PSG were disgraceful but completely outplayed Liverpool. They look worse this season, definitely Firmino and Salah. Anyway, Henderson can't actually pass the ball either, so you're a Liverpool fan because you believe that. And then DHS English clubs are the only ones that seem to hate the Europa League. Everyone else seems to realise it is in fact a trophy you can win. Well, Jose Mourinho.
I agree with that point of view, though. I think the Europa League is great opportunity for managers who've never won anything to put something there. And I think Klopp needs to do that.
It's a fair point. A reminder, of course, OTB AM is live with screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Okay, so let's move on, because Brin-Jonathan Butler spoke to us about the sinister side of professional chess, the political intrigue behind its biggest events, and the masters and prodigies gone awry. He's also been in the Deontay Wilder camp in Alabama. He believes that the Alabama brawler does indeed have the chance to be the last great American heavyweight. Here's how our conversation went. All right, time for us to turn our attention to the murky world of high quality, as in world championship level chess. I'm delighted to say one of our favourite contributors, Brin-Jonathan Butler, is with us. Brin, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so there's two reasons to have you on. Obviously, Deontay Wilder is going to fight this weekend. We'll talk to you about that in a couple of minutes' time. But who knew that the crossover between the world of high-level chess and boxing was actually so pronounced that the mental aspect of this game can ruin people in the same way that boxing does?
I think obsession in any real arena of ambition, but it seems especially chess and others that aren't as well compensated financially, can lead to some pretty dark places.
What was it that drew you first to? There's two reasons we want to talk to you. One, the ongoing situation at the moment with the World Championships, but what drew you to actually end up writing a book about it?
An editor found me in this case, which is very unusual. A publisher had read a lot of. I think I've always been drawn to lives of the extremes, and chess has a lot of characters throughout its illustrious history. Chess was invented the same century that toilet paper was, and still it has this sort of peculiar allure about what are the skills involved in chess and how are they transferable to other things. So there's just a lot of, I actually found a lot of crossover in the characters of boxing and chess.
For example?
Well, you take, Bobby Fischer in his heyday was bigger news than the Watergate scandal and the Vietnam War. Walter Cronkite would say, we'll get to those, but first let's talk about Bobby Fischer playing in Iceland. And so I found that he was a character that couldn't have been born anywhere else but America, in the same way that you have a lot of heavyweight champions that feel the same way. Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson. So I was very curious that in 1,500 years, chess has always struggled to find an audience in many ways, a mainstream audience, especially when you're having, as you're seeing in the World Chess Championship, 12 draws in a row is a hard sell to an American audience. It's always been the characters that have really drawn people in. And unfortunately, a lot of their genius walks hand in hand with some eccentricity, shall we say, with the rest of their lives.
And say in terms of Fischer and kind of the eccentric behaviour that came after his chess heyday, this wasn't a standalone kind of experience that he had. This was a bit of a trend that you found in the book.
I think there's a real continuum of great champions, especially American champions, where you find them. A lot of them were institutionalized. A lot of early identified prodigies who either succeeded at fulfilling their potential or failed, met a similar fate of just really struggling. I think there's a kind of darkness at the heart of chess if you're willing to give yourself for 14 hours a day. You can't get to this level that Magnus Carlsen is without sacrificing your entire childhood. And people forget that, these people are like Glenn Gould at the piano in terms of their investment.
And is there kind of a bit of a chicken and egg situation here in terms of whether kind of people who might experience these struggles are drawn to chess, or whether it might trigger things? Like, is there any actual kind of scientific research on that link?
I did interview some neuroscientists to discuss it, and some of that is up for grabs. But just I think when you're having a first glance at the illustrious list of the greatest players, to see a Paul Morphy, who was Bobby Fischer in the 19th century, die surrounded by women's shoes in his bathtub, or players convinced that they were playing God on a radio, and a lot of them being institutionalized. And I'm speaking strictly to at the highest level. I'm not saying kids who pick up the chessboard are going to be led to some horrible place. It's a proven great learning tool in many ways. If we look at acting at the highest level, or music, or or sports. I mean, there's many examples of people who self-destruct in order to get to the highest arenas. I just think that we often confuse people who are extraordinarily accomplished, that it's their virtues that led them there, as opposed to demons that drove them. And I think chess bears that out more than some other areas.
Did you find that when you went to cover the Magnus Carlsen World Championship, did you find that this was something that was going to be a story that resonated beyond that subculture that exists at the moment, that it has crossover appeal in a similar way? I mean, so many spend our life making these reductionist comparisons to the popularity of sports at their heyday, boxing, racing, chess in this instance. But is there crossover appeal beyond the subgenre of people who actually really like it for somebody like Magnus Carlsen?
I think it's struggling to find it, and part of what was fun to report on it was the horrendously misguided way that the organizers were trying to advertise it. For example, at the 2018 World Championships, you see on the side of the table, "The world is watching," a quote taken oddly from the 1968 Chicago Convention, where there were riots, the Democratic Convention. And as I'm watching the official FIDE feed of the game, "The world is watching," there are 4,000 people that are identified as watching. I mean, that is a very commonplace thing with chess, where the advertisers that you're seeing a loop of while you're there is like a Russian fertilizer company. So I don't necessarily think Russian fertilizer as I'm watching chess. And it felt very much almost like a kind of cross-section of coming back from Atlantic City after a boxing match, being at a Greyhound bus station to come home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then the audience from a Russian oligarch illegal art collection. So it was a very strange intersection of people to be around, as boxing is very frequently. I mean, Pacquiao Mayweather had the most celebrity star power that that I can conceive has ever been assembled for anything. It was all of music, all of American politics, sports, film, and Donald Trump is there. I mean, it was incredible. So I think with chess, there are some big names that are interested. Several billionaires were coming to the event, but it's still seen as a little bit nerdy. It's still struggling to find its way, and I think it's trying to compare itself to say, more people do this than tennis or poker. Can't we be just as financially viable? But if you or I competed in America at the U.S. Championships and we came in 12th, we would make $5,000. That's what you make here for that kind of esteemed title. So it tells you, in terms of the financial viability of the sport, it's not really professional in that way. It's more of a charity for billionaires to keep it afloat.
And speaking of Russian fertilizer, the championship that you focus on in the book, that was actually happening in New York against the backdrop of Trump being elected. And what was that experience like?
Oh, it was like a collective nervous breakdown in New York. I think 70 to 80% of people here voted for Hillary Clinton, and they were in shock. And I think the best metaphor I came up for in the book was, it was like the Titanic hitting the glacier, and the only place in the city where people weren't talking about what do we do next was being in the games room, which is where the Fulton Market felt like watching chess. Everybody was just concerned, oh, Magnus Carlsen, is he the greatest player ever? And amidst not quite rioting outside, but not far off, I mean, literally there were Trump piñatas being beaten, there were American flags that were set on fire. It was a very bizarre, very sad scene. There were a lot of people in tears riding the subway days after the election. There was just a real sense of, how did this happen? Like, I guess because New York, more intimately than the rest of the country, has been so close to Trump and his exploits, there was just a lot of disbelief and sadness. So, and I was trying to figure it out too. I mean, I don't think very many people saw Trump coming, and we had a Russian challenger where Putin had actually bankrolled him to come from Crimea to Moscow and was sending in high-level officials to watch somebody who was representative of all the values of kind of Putin's Russia. So it was a weird redux of sort of the Cold War backdrop with Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky.
And so, is Carlson the greatest ever player? Is that just a question that's thrown out there with a bit of hyperbole attached to try and ignite some interest, or is he genuinely as good as any of those greats?
Well, he has the highest rating ever, but you could look at Bobby Fischer and make an argument and say the distance between him and the next best player is the widest there's ever been in chess history. You could look at the ways in which Fischer was able to be as accomplished as he was demonstrating big victories consistently. And Carlsen, we're seeing some struggle with, especially in this championship. He offered a draw in the 12th game of the championship, and it sort of offended the whole chess world about is this in keeping with being the greatest ever? So there's some debate about it. He's certainly an absolutely extraordinary player who's been world champion for 5 years. He's still a very young man, but we're going to see, I mean, if he loses in this overtime as it heads toward Armageddon, as the chess world says, I think he's going to define his legacy in big ways.
You mentioned the $5,000 if you're like 12th in the USA Championships. Is Magnus Carlsen rich beyond the wildest dreams of a child setting out with a chessboard?
Well, he's certainly making seven figures with advertising. It's £1 million that's divided by the winner and loser of the World Championship, and this is his third. So he's doing very well by chess standards. But to put it in perspective a little bit, if it was $5 million that was used to organize the World Championship in New York, and that would be about 8 seats at Pacquiao-Mayweather. So
yeah, fair enough.
Where is it relative to other things? It's not anywhere close to professional sports, but I wouldn't mind making the kind of money that Magnus Carlsen is on the chessboard, and also he's doing some advertising and some modeling and that kind of thing. So he's doing very well by chess standards. But a refrain that I heard from many chess players, including grandmasters, was that while 600 million people might play the game, only about 30 players can actually make a living exclusively playing. And those aren't very heartening figures for the ecosystem of the game.
No, for sure. The ecosystem of heavyweight boxing at the moment is about as healthy as it's been really since the Klitschko's came to power. This fight this weekend where Deontay Wilder is going to take on Tyson Fury, you spent some time in the Wilder camp. What was that like? What is the level of expectation? What is he specifically training for? And what does he see as the threat that Tyson Fury is going to bring this week?
Well, the first question I asked Deontay Wilder is, if you're successful against Fury and successful against Joshua, let's say you knock them both out in the first round, are you the last great American heavyweight? Because who comes after you? There's not really anybody else out there. And watching him spar, he has an assistant trainer named Mark Breland, who was an Olympic welterweight world champion and also became a professional world champion. And I asked Breland when he put on his first pair of gloves, and he said 8 years old. And I said, okay. Deontay Wilder put on his first pair of gloves at 19, very late for a boxer. Whereabouts is he at in his skill level relative to you, Mark Breland, as a welterweight? He thought about it and got this sort of wry, almost embarrassed smile and said, probably 11. So it tells you a lot about where the heavyweight division is now, or perhaps where it's always been in terms of skill.
Anthony Joshua was the same, right? Though he was very late to the game as well. So there's a belief out there that potentially what's going to happen is that the best high school athletes who try and make it as basketballers or as tight ends in football, they get to a certain point and they realise they're not going to make the pro career. But actually, big-time professional boxing, you know, a bit of showmanship, a bit of razzmatazz, and a few tomato cans, and away you go.
Well, and it's certainly been that way for Deontay Wilder. When I watch him shadow box, I've been around a lot of elite level champions. It is startling how basic he is in terms of skill level. And he also doesn't look like a boxer. His build is that of a wide receiver or a basketball player. But he has this right hand that is almost otherworldly in its speed, in its menace, and its impact. It's extraordinary. So there were a lot of journalists from England who were over there to examine Wilder up close. And what we all concluded at the same time, almost watching him spar, and I thought he lost most of the rounds that he sparred against his 3 sparring partners, by the way, was that if he's unable to knock out Fury, this could very easily be a 12-round to nothing shutout for Fury, outboxing him, just boxing circles around him. But then again, this could very easily be a first-round knockout for Wilder. And that itself makes it intrinsically an interesting fight, and Wilder a very interesting proposition, because stylistically, it's very hard to solve somebody who really hasn't figured out themselves. And Wilder's style is just land a right hand. There's really nothing beyond it, which is, I've never seen anything like it up close in an elite fighter's camp.
And despite his record on his show reel, one of the kind of rods that's been used to kind of hit him in these parts of the world is the fact that he's not really a draw. If he did get past Fury this weekend, and if that fight with Anthony Joshua did come together, you spoke about Mayweather-Pacquiao earlier and sort of the scale that was on. Like, would Joshua against Wilder be a fight that you could see really taking light and capturing the imagination, or is it kind of just its own niche at this point?
Well, I think the big struggle is that we're in a time right now where boxing is so viable and exploding in popularity, mainstream popularity, just not in the United States very much. HBO, after 45 years, has pulled out of boxing completely. It's extraordinary, especially when you're seeing all of these other ventures, DAZN, ESPN Plus, billions of dollars being invested in boxing because they're seeing its viability to an audience. They just want to move away from the pay-per-view model, which has made extraordinary amounts of money for very few people, but really cut off that sort of TV visibility that boxing used to have in America. So you have somebody like Joshua who hasn't even needed to fight in the United States. We haven't seen that really in the modern era. Every major fighter had to come to the US to make their mint. And Joshua doesn't have to at all. He can sell 90,000 seats fighting you or me and make 10 to 15 million. So it's Wilder, I think, who has to come to him. But there's all these problems politically as far as who their promoters are. So it's just a question of can they make it work? And I think boxing has been defined largely in the last 20 years by the fights it was unable to make when it should have made it, as opposed to the great fights it did make. So I hope it can get out of its own way and make some of these fights, because they're all interesting on paper. I think Fury, what he's done to come back, and he's such a great character at selling his fights. I hope that this generates an audience, but the question is, will it? Is it viable? And you're absolutely right. Wilder has never proven himself to be a very popular fighter. His career earnings are less than what Mike Tyson earned in 90 seconds fighting Michael Spinks, so it puts it a bit in perspective.
I didn't realise that they were so low. Where is the actual fight in the States? It's pay-per-view on BT Sport here. Where do people in the States watch it, and what kind of price is it?
It'll be in Los Angeles, and I think it's a pretty high price. It's certainly not Pacquiao-Mayweather, but yeah, they're going to give it a try in Los Angeles. I think at this point, Joshua, I mean, will he come to Las Vegas? He hasn't yet. He's never fought in the United States. So I think Wilder's still only... This fight is going to be very important to Wilder in terms of his own financial projections, because if he looks bad or he loses, his entire career is going to be dismissed as somebody who was largely protected and didn't have skills. If he performs extraordinarily well, he has a lot more leverage going forward to fight Joshua. So I think it's all for him to win or lose on this, but it's a big risk. Fury is a big risk for Wilder, no question.
If Fury wins, does his past achievements suddenly catapult him into the American boxing consciousness in a way that maybe it wasn't there before?
I think he's a tough sell. I mean, he's just unfortunately not a great American-style fighter. I mean, he's an awkward fighter, and he's gigantic, and he's a great character. It's possible that he'd be able to sell himself. I don't have the sense that this fight has really resonated outside of boxing junkies. so far. It doesn't feel that way. I don't see that on social media, but the numbers won't lie. Ultimately, it's can he sell tickets? Can he put people in seats? So I've heard a lot of wildly different projections about how successful people are anticipating this fight being. My sense is it probably won't be, because I don't think Wilder has ever demonstrated that he brings a big audience. So a lot of it will be on Fury and sort of what's elicited from the fight in terms of quality of competition. Certainly, if Fury was able to knock out Wilder, I think we have a very different story. But I think the odds currently are 6-1 that happens, and I might place them a lot higher than that. If he's able to put a performance like he did against Klitschko, I think he stands a very good chance of not just winning, but possibly knocking out somebody like Wilder. Wilder's been dropped twice. He was dropped early in his career against an absolute nobody, but Wilder's also very determined. Wilder had 2 other jobs after he turned professional. He's a hard worker, and I was very impressed by what I saw in terms of his character when I met him. There were signs in the gym. There was one just before he fought for the heavyweight championship that said, "And the next heavyweight champion." And when he came back to the gym after winning, he crossed it out and said, "The new heavyweight champion." There were fun little things like that it reminded me a little bit of being in Wildcard Gym, where Pacquiao made it so famous with Freddie Roach. That was a bit of the dynamic between JD's and Deontay Wilder. So that impressed me.
Freddie, of course, in the corner now for Tyson Fury. We had Andy Lee in during the week, and he was making the point that Tyson Fury got in touch with Andy to ask him to come and just be a part of the camp, like as an advisor, or just to add a bit of boxing craft, because he's got a relatively inexperienced coach. And now all of a sudden Freddie Roach is in his corner. It's like, well, that's an interesting little injection of character into exactly what's going on as a subplot.
Everything I heard from the British press in Alabama was that Tyson Fury is looking very, very good, and he's taking this very seriously. Lost well over 100 pounds. I hope he can deliver. I think he's a great character. I mean, he's a fascinating story. But yeah, everything I was hearing from people watching him was he was impressive. I think the world of Freddie. I owe a career in journalism to Freddie Roach, giving me Mike Tyson's phone number. That's how I started. So I'm a big supporter of him and what he can do. But you know, Fury has nothing to lose at this point. I think Wilder has a lot to lose. I think Wilder's life is changing pretty dramatically, but could get derailed very easily by Fury. That's what's exciting about this game. You're one punch away from a completely different life, or having no life at all in some cases. This is a very dangerous game.
Brin-Jonathan Butler, always great to have you on the show. Thanks a million. Enjoy the fight this weekend.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And the book, of course, again, is called The Grandmaster, Magnus Carlsen and the Match That Made Chess Great Again.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.